So let's assume for the purposes of this video that the average person can't afford to eat and save a £57,000 deposit from a salary of £38,000. And let's assume that the average person is you. What's up guys, my name is Safisa. Welcome to my channel Solo Living. In today's video I'm going to talk you guys through the government's Help to Buy equity loan scheme, which was put in place to help people like you and me bridge the gap between our savings and the required deposit amount. Everything I include in this video will be relevant for the new scheme effective in 2021. Before we delve into the main content, I quickly want to cover the main differences between the LISA, Help to Buy Savings, and Help to Buy Equity Loan Scheme, because these terms are used quite interchangeably and it can get a bit confusing, especially on how they all interact together. So the LISA and the Help to Buy Savings are both savings accounts that you use for the purpose of saving up to buy your first home, if you want to use them, that is. Although with the LISA, you can also use them to save up for retirement. The main benefits of these accounts is that the government will give you a 25% bonus on whatever it is that you save in those accounts during the tax year. Terms and conditions apply. But the main point is these are savings accounts. The Help to Buy Equity Loan Scheme is a scheme that we said has been put in place by the government, and is what we're going to be talking about today. This isn't to be confused with the Help to Buy Savings account. You don't need to have saved in the Help to Buy Savings account in order to use the Help to Buy Equity Loan Scheme. You can use this scheme regardless of how and where you save your money, as long as it's legal. The Help to Buy Equity Loan is a loan from the government that you use to put towards your deposit to buy your first home. You can borrow anywhere from 5 to 20% of the value of the property you want to buy. If you're in London, you can borrow up to 40%. Probably something to do with the crazy prices in London. Speaking of madness in London, another thing to note about this scheme is that there is a price cap on the price of the property that you want to buy. I'm not sure that that's proper English, so I'm going to put up a picture right about here to show you guys what I mean. This is actually one of the more unfortunate changes that they've introduced in 2021, because I'm pretty sure when I purchased my flat, there were only 2 price caps to reflect our way of living, London and everyone else. But as you can see, it looks like they've broken this further down into the various regions that we have across our country, and apparently the Northeast is really cheap. Not that I'm a hater, but I do wonder whether somebody buying a 600k property as a first-time buyer needs help from the state. Anyway, jealousy aside and back to the facts. Whilst you can borrow up to 20 or 40% from the government, you yourself are still required to put in a deposit of at least 5% of the value of the property. Stay put. We're going to do some maths a little later to put all of this into context. This will be a quick section because almost everyone can qualify, but not everyone. 1, you must be buying a residential property. This means a home you can live in. 2, you and anyone else you're buying with must be first-time buyers. Annoyingly, if you're married, you must make a joint application with your spouse. I know. 3, you can only use the scheme to buy a new build property. Now, this doesn't mean that you go onto Rightmove and filter for new build properties. Well, it does. But I soon learned that not all new build properties qualify for this scheme. In other words, not all new builds are Help to Buy properties, but all Help to Buy properties are new builds. And a bonus point, all the aforementioned mean that you qualify to apply for the scheme, but when you actually go through the scheme, they will run an affordability test. Much like what the mortgage providers do, is just to make sure that you can actually afford to take out the loan and to make the repayments. More on that later. Now that you know what the scheme is and you know that you qualify, you're probably wondering how the scheme will actually help you. So let's go do some quick maths. Say the property you want to buy is £200,000. We know that we have to put in minimum 5% deposit from our own hard-earned legal money or generously gifted legal money. 5% of £200,000 is £10,000. Let's imagine that you're one of the majority and you don't live in London, nor do you want to buy in London. You can borrow anywhere up to 20% from the government. The more you borrow, the larger your deposit, the lower your mortgage payments and interest. So let's assume that you borrow the maximum 20%. 20% of 200,000 is £40,000. So your £10,000 plus the £40,000 loan from the government means you can now go to the bank and tell them that you have a deposit of £50,000. This means you now only need a mortgage of £150,000 in order to buy your £200,000 property. Whether or not the bank will give you this mortgage depends on your own personal circumstances. It might be that you may need to look at lower property prices. We do go over this in my first time buyer's guide, so make sure you check that video out if you need any more information. Before we go into the pros and cons of the scheme, we have to discuss the elephant in the room. And funnily enough, this section is actually closely linked to the pros and cons of the scheme. Let's just get the easiest part out of the way first. 1, you have to repay the loan in full. This ain't no student loans, it's not gonna get cancelled after 30 years. No, you have to repay the loan in full. But you do this when one of 3 things happen. 1, your loan term comes to an end, usually tied to your mortgage term. 2, you finish paying off your mortgage repayments. Or 3, when you sell your house. You can't transfer the loan to another property that you buy. It's tied to this first property that you buy. So when you sell, you gotta pay the government their money. Now, this is very important to understand. And in fact, it's why I prefer to think of this as an investment rather than as a loan. When I say you have to repay the government in full, I don't mean the £40,000 that we borrowed. No. Think of the government as investors. They invested 20% of the value of your property when you initially borrowed from them. And when you sell, they want 20% of the value of your property at that selling date. Market value, not some bootleg value because you sold to your cousin. No. So let's use some numbers to put this into context. We bought our house for £200,000, but God is good and now your house is worth £400,000. You need to repay the government 20% of £400,000. This is £80,000. You follow my drift? You borrowed £40,000, but you now need to repay £80,000. So you can see why some people may consider this a huge con of the scheme. I personally don't view it that way because you've also made a huge profit, which was only made possible because of the loan/investment that the government has made. And it's also worth noting that this goes both ways. If the value of your property, God forbid, goes down to 100k, you only then repay the government 20% of 100k and not 20% of 200k. So you win together, you lose together. It's an investment. And now on to the harder stuff, interest. So the first 5 years of your loan are interest-free. Major pro. You only pay £1 a month for admin fee. From year 6 onwards, you start to pay interest. You pay a monthly interest amount of 1.75% of the value of the loan. So using our earlier example where we took out a loan of £40,000, you're paying £58 a month in interest. Not too bad so far. However, the interest amount will go up in line with inflation plus a fixed rate of 2%. That 2% is how they get you. Inflation rate in 2020 was 0.5%, so let's just use that for example. In year 7, this would mean that you have to pay £122 a month. And of course, this will depend on what inflation actually is that year. This increasing interest rate is why most people plan to sell off their Help to Buy properties before the 5 years are up. So a quick shout out to myself before I wrap this video up with the pros and cons. If you have enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up so that YouTube knows you guys enjoyed it and they will recommend it to other people, and it would help me out a ton. So don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I'm trying to be a glass half full person, so I want to end this video on a positive note, which means we're going to start with the cons. First con, you have to repay the value of the property at the selling date and not the value of the loan that you initially took out. Second con, you can only buy new build properties, and some people are not fans of new build properties for a number of reasons, such as the fact that they tend to be smaller than older homes. First pro, you don't have to pay interest in the first 5 years. If you're clever, you use that period to save or invest and help you repay your loan before the interest really kicks in. The second pro, which is why most of us are here, is that this scheme is really helpful in topping up people's savings so that they can afford to buy their first home, get you on that property ladder, and benefit from the stability that home ownership provides. And that, guys, is everything you need to know about the Help to Buy Equity Loan Scheme. I hope. If you do have any comments, questions, feedback, anything at all, please comment it in the section below and I'll do my best to get back to you guys. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up on your way out and consider checking out my other videos. You may like it and want to join the community. See you guys back next week.